constantly hearing language, using language, and practicing language, the intentional message. So, what is an intentional message? An intentional message is a written or verbal statement. It's embedded with key vocabulary that really sets the purpose of the learning activity. So, we use the intentional message with children to expose them to rich and interesting words, to select words that are relevant to their learning experiences, and to map and repeat language for them and with them. So, creating an intentional message enhances vocabulary development. It's embedded with content vocabulary, and it's a written message that sets that purpose. So, an example here is today we're going to observe and build a structure. So, this builds off of a unit of study or theme of structures that you've seen carried throughout some of these sessions. So, some keywords that I've selected are observe, build, and structure. I would write this on a board or maybe a sentence strip and begin my activity reading the intentional message to the group and showing them with concrete materials what we'll be exploring. So, the intentional message should always be accompanied by visuals, materials, gestures, something that engages the children so that they're not staring at letters and words on a wall. We really need to be intentional and actively demonstrate for them the meaning of the word. So in this case, I would use materials and gestures perhaps to show meaning, like real pictures in a book, or blocks, how to construct blocks to make different kinds of structures. I might take the children outside to see if it's possible, what is around us in terms of buildings and types of structures. I might create a hand signal, which is a gesture that might map that word to the meaning. So you might think about, as we're reading these words, some gestures that you might come up with. So, for example, for the word observe, you might have the children or you give an example of observing is when we're looking with our eyes. And so you might point to under your eyes and move your head side to side to scan. This might be a gesture for the word observe. Building might be something like layering your hands one on top of the other as if you're stacking something. And a structure could be you standing up and keeping your arms at your side and being very straight and tall, like a structure. So there are lots of ways to do this. And of course, children love to participate in helping come up with hand signals or gestures as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So here are some examples of intentional messages that providers have used as they talk about what the children are learning. So you'll see we are learning how to wash and dry our laundry. So some key vocabulary there: learning, wash, dry, laundry. Another example is around a concept of studying caterpillars. So the intentional message says, scientists, today we will observe the green squirmy caterpillars. So it may be that you have a video of caterpillars, or you may actually have caterpillars that the children are actively observing over time. So the keywords here would be scientists, observe, green, squirmy, and caterpillars. Another intentional message here is an example of when you take children outside, your outdoor environment is a wonderful way to expose them to new, rich, interesting words. So in this case, we've said, today, explorers, let's use our fingers to gently touch the flowers and our noses to smell them. So this might be a unit of study around our senses, our bodies. It could also be about flowers and plants or growth. And the keywords that are selected are explorers. So what does it mean to explore, to be an explorer? Fingers, gently, touch, flowers, noses, and smell. So in one message, you can load it with really rich vocabulary. And when used repetitively, children begin to say these words over and over, and they're really making concrete that meaning. The written message can be introduced and expanded with children. So, using realia, you can add descriptive words to connect to deeper meaning. So, some examples here, we live in a neighborhood. That's a nice basic sentence. And two words here are live and neighborhood. Neighborhood is a big concept. And so, you may be in this unit of study or theme or concept that you're exploring, you're talking about what's around you. Or you could be expanding on the theme of structures, and in a neighborhood, there are many structures around you. So this could be a community unit. It would serve many types of themes. As we think about how we might expand, ask the children to help you with this. You might have materials or picture books available, and they would be able to help point out words or sounds or things that are familiar in this neighborhood. So, some examples could be large, busy, noisy, quiet, so your sound words. Who lives in a community? Families, could be police officers, health workers, mail carriers. What are some of the environmental aspects of a neighborhood? Parks, trees, green grass, and structures that you see are buildings and shops, stores, um, supermarkets, apartments. So the list can go on, and you can really use this to expand vocabulary with children. It's a really exciting time to have lots of back and forth dialogue. So you can see here in this next sentence, we started with the basic sentence, we live in a neighborhood. And if you're expanding with children, you might say, we live in a large neighborhood with houses, families, parks, and trees. Here's another example. Intentional messages aren't always written, and so they can be used during many different learning activities. And again, remember, during lots of experiences with children of all ages. So intentional messages can be verbal, and they're revisited often during activities, and they're repeated often throughout the day. So choosing 3 or 4 keywords in a message and repeating it often will support children's language learning. So in this intentional message, you see children, they're having time for some music and movement. And so an intentional message here might be, let's use our bodies to wiggle, slide, jump, and twist. And even as I say these words, my body actually wants to move in the way that the words are describing kind of action to me. And so it's a very natural thing that you would pair words with some sort of movement. And so this lends itself really nicely to that. So repetition, we know for young children is critical, and infants and toddlers really seek patterns and routines. As they show interest in something, stay there and describe what it is they notice. And each time they go back to that item, use the same words, those rich and interesting words, to describe that experience. For example, here, there's a mobile that's hanging with some beautiful, colorful leaves. And the infant here is stopping, and the infant's wanting to touch those leaves. So it might be that your intentional message is touch the red and orange leaf, leaf, leaf. So we're saying it over and over, focusing on maybe one word, but saying the same thing repetitively, so that the child's hearing that word as they're learning and actually experiencing that moment and experiencing what it's like to touch this item, this leaf, leaf, leaf. So use the intentional message to describe what the child's doing in the moment. So again, infants' movements and routines are often predictable. So the intentional message is there to really map language to what the child is doing and experiencing over and over again. So in this case, we have an infant that after nap time, one of her routines is to have a little time in the mirror, and kind of it helps her to wake up and get activated and her body moving. So on the mat, she's looking at herself in the mirror. And an intentional message, an example here might be you describing what's happening. So who is in the mirror? That's Sara. Sada, Sada. Sada is moving and kicking her legs. Kick, kick, kick. So as Sada is moving and doing an action, you can map the word to the action. It seems very natural to do this, but there's actual great intentionality in it because you're describing lots of things that she's doing, and you're also pausing and repeating that word or words over and over so that she's hearing it and getting exposed to that language and understanding what that is in the moment, so that it carries forward. And each time she does it, she'll begin to start forming those sounds. Now let's watch some demonstrations of using intentional messages with children, first with toddlers and then preschool age children.